Part 3 is a collaborative, data-driven construction administration software built for architects and engineers. With Part 3, you'll complete your administrative tasks faster than ever before. You'll streamline your submittals, RFIs, change documents, and field reports with automation and intelligence. Stop wasting time on tedious tasks. Schedule a free demo of this transformative automation tool today at part3.io/getstarted. That's part3.io/getstarted. Experience construction administration performance today with Part 3. Are you tired of dealing with generic IT providers that rely on you to be the expert? Ask yourself, does my IT provider understand the software tools that I'm using on a daily basis? If I'm on a deadline and lose access to my project files, is my IT provider available 24/7 to help me? Does my IT provider help me select and integrate new software? When you're focusing on problems like these, you're not working on your next big project. ArcIT is here to help. We focus on solving technology for architecture firms so that you can focus on doing your best work. Find us at getarchit.com. That's getarchit.com and click Work with Us.
My name is Mark R. LePage, and I'm joined by Patrick McLamey, FAIA, and former CEO of the international architecture firm HOK. This is buildSMART. After his time at HOK, Patrick, as he puts it, has been repurposed. Now, as the chairman of buildingSMART International, Patrick will outline a new strategy for the building industry and so much more. You'll find that there's a lesson in every episode. Okay, Patrick, this episode is titled My Contractor Friend.
I've been thinking about this, Mark. Kajima was actually one of the first chapters to join buildingSMART. They were present when the founding chapters gathered in London at this old hotel called, ironically, the White House. At the time, HOK and Kajima were connected. I was going back and forth to Japan, so naturally I brought it up. There was one man on the Kajima, it wasn't necessarily board of directors, but executive group, Dr. Mikio Shoji, a really nice man, spoke perfectly good English, very highly educated. And he was immediately interested in this idea of using the computer to help improve design and construction. And Kajima is a big construction company, but as is the tradition in Japan, they also have a giant design department, architects and engineers that work for them. So he was quite interested in it. And he and his colleagues attended that first meeting. And I can still remember that he hosted, the Kajima hosted a buildingSMART summit in the early days in Tokyo. But then HOK and Kajima parted ways. We bought their shares out, as you remember from the HOK story. And he went on to do some other things. And so we kind of got separated. And even though there was a Japan chapter, I didn't have any real connections or any buddies in the chapter. I knew the people, still know them, but I was missing a buddy. And the Kajima people had gotten distracted after he left to do some other things. They'd gotten distracted and weren't really, they were members of the Japan chapter, but they weren't visible to the overall buildingSMART community. So I had an opportunity to reconnect with Kajima. I was actually invited by Victor Bocconi, and you'll remember that we interviewed Victor. He was the head of Graphisoft at that time. He's now been pushed upstairs to one of the leaders of Nemetschek Group. And he invited me to speak at a Graphisoft conference in Tokyo. And I said, well, gee, Victor, it's sponsored by your company. It's a software house. I can't do that because I'm a member of buildingSMART and we're neutral. He said, I guarantee you there won't be anything that you can't say or do on that stage. I just want you to tell your story about why it's important for architects and engineers to go digital and to develop interoperable tools. And I said, well, geez, it's still a long way and I travel a lot. And he said, and all the big Japanese contractors are going to have senior representatives there. I said, would that include Kajima? Yes, they'll be there. Okay, that was good enough for me. So I went to Japan to this conference. Victor greeted me warmly. I gave one of the keynotes that was well received. And the keynote right after mine was from the senior representative from Kajima. And I didn't know him before then. And that was Mr. Yajima, or as I now call him with fondness, Yajima-san. And he and I have become best buddies.
We are developing a new production system that can simulate not only design, but also all construction management in advance using BIM, and manage all construction site in real time. Virtual construction, IoT, and robotics technology will enable semi-automation of the site.
He talked about automating the construction process with digitization. He had a very cool system for automatically calculating the amount of sheet pile necessary to do an excavation for a big building. And another program that automatically could calculate the scaffolding necessary to completely scaffold a building if you're going to do something on the skin. And I thought, this guy is really with it. Well, it turns out he was the head of digital construction for Kajima. You talk about the use of robots in construction, what your thinking is.
We make some robots suitable to construction site. For example, one is self-finishing floor level robot, self-painter robot, and self-fire extinguishing system robot, and
a welding robot.
Welding.
Yeah.
Concrete flattening robot.
Concrete flattening.
Pouring the concrete.
And is the robot using BIM to find its way around?
Now they are using BIM also to recognize the place by themselves. It's the combination of the IoT visually recognizing by camera and recognize the position of the robot by BIM is the perfect combination to control the robot at the site. The other one is the logistic in site. The truck will bring the many materials and unload someplace in the site. But we should assign all those to the place where we will adjust or the work for. So that's the internal logistics robot's role. And then deliver all the materials to the place. Some drone, the internal drone also, we start to use.
And what are you using the drones for?
Site management, so some safety check or quality check. We also have the cleaning robot. So automatically they run after the working time and then clean all the floor by themselves.
Well, that's nice. I'd like to get one of those. And they had their own system using different softwares, and they had to find interoperable connections between the softwares, which big companies could do at great difficulty. But he and I just hit it off. And I remember the last night, the Graphisoft people took us on a boat tour of Tokyo Bay. And he and I and some of the other Japanese shared a table. And he brought out a nice bottle of Japanese whiskey.
Yeah, I remember. Maybe the Yamazaki.
And he knew that I like whiskey. He does too. And we sipped that whiskey. I don't think I looked outside the window at the view more than once or twice because we were intensely in conversation. By the end of that cruise, the bottle of whiskey was gone. I know it wasn't just he and I. There were a bunch of us. But he and I had become best buddies. I said, you're members of the Japan chapter, but you've got a big story to tell. You should become an international member, maybe even a strategic member. of buildingSMART International? And he said, yes, I think you're right. So he went and asked his boss, who was one of the directors of the company, and Kajima came up with the money and joined buildingSMART as a strategic member. So Kajima was basically a real force within International. They're the ones that founded the construction room, which was how do you apply digital tools to the construction process? How do you make construction easier, better, faster, more sure, and et cetera? He's now got a bunch of Kajima people involved in it.
Honestly, I felt BSI, especially focused on the design. So I think that we must build organized to construction room.
Yes. Okay, so basically you said, okay, these people are all talking about exchanging information in design phase, but you're a builder, you want to exchange information in construction. So you took the initiative and began the construction room, which has now grown quite large, doing some very interesting things. Maybe can you please, or Endo-san, tell us what is the construction room doing to advance the use of BIM in construction?
Mr. Endo, Chairman of Construction Rooms.
Now we are forming the steering committee meeting. And so we have the members in the European countries, Germany, Italy, and the UK also. So our activity is spreading to the world. And now we want to recruit much more members from the Czech Republic or some of the Asian countries. And our activities are based on the use case, gathering and accumulating the use cases of the BIM on the site field.
Yes.
So the design BIM and then the field BIM are quite different. So show the use cases to the world is quite valuable and informative, I believe. So spreading out our activities to the world is my mission.
So they're firmly engaged in buildingSMART at a very high level. He's now served on our board of directors for a number of years and remains, I think, without question, my best friend in Japan. The last time we had a summit there, he and his wife invited my wife and me to a small town called Hakone, which is near Mount Fuji. And Hakone, Hakone, I didn't know about before, but Hakone is famous for its hot springs.
After the summit meeting, we had a 2-day excursion with Mr. Patrick and his wife, Jin-san. We toured around Mount Fuji on Lake Yamanaka, ate delicious Japanese hot pot noodle, and stayed one night at the Japanese most famous Hakone hot spring at the foot of Mount Fuji.
And so we went to a very fancy, very nice, elegant hotel built by Kajima that had private hot water coming from the springs with little private pools of water in each of the suites.
Wow.
I didn't want to leave. It was so nice. But we just, again, we've become best friends. He exemplifies the International Friendship Club in buildingSMART. So even though Kajima started with us in the earliest days, it was only after I reached out personally to Yajima that Kajima really engaged with buildingSMART at the high level as a strategic partner and then a board member and a room leader and basically a personal friendship.
Yeah. Did the relationship with Kajima bring in other contractors to the organization? Was Kajima the first? And if so, were they sort of you said that they started the construction room. Were they the inspiration for other contractors to join buildingSMART International?
Yes. And in fact, I just returned, as you know, from Montreal, where we had a summit. And there I met at least one other big Japanese contractor, Shimizu. There are 5 big Japanese contractors that have dominated that marketplace. Kajima and Shimizu and Takanaka and two others. And I think they're basically all finally joining because the momentum is just too strong now. So they're all active at the local level, but now I'm seeing Shimizu, they've joined the construction room. So we're starting to see them at summits instead of them just going to meetings in Japan. That's the big difference. They're reaching out and connecting internationally and working with others around the globe to create digital standards for, in their case, construction, which is fantastic.
In order to build smart, you need to operate intelligently. If you feel frustrated wrangling all your spreadsheets to get a clear view of where your projects stand today, or you're tired of staring at poorly designed software that's just slowing you down, Monograph is here to help. Designed by architects for architects, the Monograph platform allows you to track your firm's time, projects, budgets, invoices, and payments all in real time. With their innovative visualization tool, MoneyGant, you can immediately see whether you're under or over budget. Need to easily adjust your team's time week to week? Their tool Resource allows you to reallocate your team's time and track its impact on your remaining budget. Visit monograph.com today to see why hundreds of architecture firms call Monograph a game changer.
That story highlights the importance of friendship. That's been a theme throughout your story of Building Smart International.
How are architects and contractors going to become friends?
Well, I think we're being driven together, Mark, by the evolution not only of the IFC standard, which, think about it, the IFC standard is all about collaboration. It's all about sharing information and coordinating. And the world is more specialized than ever these days. Not only do we have architects, but we have all kinds of specialty engineers, and we have specialty consultants. You have a special consultant for the glass that you use in your windows. You have consultants for insulation and for energy consumption and all on and on. It's a world of specialized knowledge, meaning that buildings are more complex. This separation, though, over those years, Mark, since the AIA was founded, once we became separate, gradually, through lobbying efforts and so on, the laws of the different states began to reflect that. So we have, by the time I was trained as an architect, it was pretty clearly understood that the architect would contract separately with, if someone wants a building designed, you hire an architect first, you sign a contract with the architect, who typically then has subcontracts with a design team, engineers, and so on. And then when the design is finished, the owner would go out to put it out to bid and select a contractor and have a separate contract with the contractor. So what's wrong with it is you're taking design and build and you're formalizing their separation. And when I was trained as an architect, I was trained that the architect should be wary of the contractor because the contractor is not interested in design. They're only interested in the price that they can finish the project so they can make a profit. And that it was up to the designer to take care and guard against the building being not built properly. So my relationship with the contractor was a stressful one. So that began to really eat at me, but I had a really interesting experience along the way, early days of HOK, when we were selected to design the Moscone Convention Center, which I talked about last season. I was put into a partnership with a contractor by an enlightened owner. The owner said, "This is nuts. I want you two to work together. I want you to collaborate fully. During design, the architect will design, but I want the contractor to have a seat at your table. And as you're designing, they're doing cost estimates, they're advising you on constructability analysis and so on. And during construction, I want the architect to have a seat at the contractor's table. And I want you to be partners throughout." We didn't know how it would work out, but we became fast friends and realized, oh, I have a lot to learn from my friend, this contractor. that led me to believe that we made a basic error in not so much separating out the tasks of design and build, but separating ourselves legally and pitting ourselves against one another.
Yeah. You think about the building industry, even before it was an industry, for thousands of years, buildings were built by guilds, right? When a parish wanted a new cathedral, they would go out to the guild and say, hey, we want a new cathedral. And they would hire the guild. The guild would go out there, they would design it, they'd get it approved, they'd go out and build it. The whole thing was done by one organization. And then just recently, right? Just recently, since our Capitol was built in the United States and the dome was built, right around that moment in time, something shifted and we separated into these two factions, right? An architecture design side and a general contractor construction side. And then that's how it's been since then. And you think, in our careers, that's how it's always been. So you have this mentality that that's just the way it's always been. But there were great benefits to the way it was before we were separated. And obviously there's been lots of benefits of us being separated, right? There's lots of legal issues that can be separated. And you talked about the complexity of putting buildings together. That makes it a good thing to have these two separate pieces, but there's definitely benefits to us coming back, and you've experienced those things. What would you say that would be the one thing that would cause this to shift again, right? You were talking about this collaboration with buildingSMART. There's benefits to us working together, maybe not like the guilds, but in a new way. How do you think, or what would cause architects and contractors to work together like they did in the past?
Okay, well, that's of course the key question. And I do think that the IFC standard is helping with this, because the IFC standard is all about sharing information, computer to computer or program to program. And why stop at sharing within the design team and let the contractor start all over again? We do some really goofy things to satisfy the requirements of the law, but the law needs to change, and it is changing. In many states now, or in certain localities, design, bid, build, which is the process that's baked into the law in many places, is now changing. It's more flexible as owners are beginning to understand that it's not as workable in today's especially litigious environment. The worst service we can give a building owner is to have a lack of collaboration between design and build. So why not put us together? In fact, enlightened owners are already doing this. There's a well-known process called design build, where the owner hires a design build team, the contractor and the architect at the same time, and tells them both to collaborate, much like I was told for the Moscone Center. You collaborate, do the work together. And often these design build projects have a positive incentive to encourage collaboration, which is if you build the project within the original budget and within the original schedule, there will be a bonus for the design and the build team that they will share, so that there's a financial incentive. But I will say, having worked both ways, I don't really think that there's any real future to design, bid, build. It pits the two people who should be partners against one another. It's unhealthy and unnatural, and much better to use either design build, or there are other forms where the owner actually becomes a partner in the process. That's integrated project delivery, where the owner, the design team, and the build team all agree at the beginning. They're bound by one contract with a set of standards, and collaborate fully. And if there is an issue, a problem, and I'm a firm believer in this, Mark, if there is a flaw, a problem that we discover, it's far better and far less expensive to share that together and to figure out the solution together than in our own separate corners. The worst thing that we can do is call in the lawyers and have the lawyers decide how we're going to solve our differences. All the lawyers do is cost money. They're not architects, they're not builders. They just take money and finally, maybe with a judge, help to forge a financial solution. They don't make better buildings. Better buildings are up to us, but it's up to us as designers and builders, and we should be natural partners. So the IFC standard is now encouraging that we're all using BIM models, Mark. The contractor uses BIM models just like we do BIM software. And why shouldn't we fully share that information in order to help each other be successful? And that's the essence of it. And I have found that contractors, in fact, do care about design. They are interested in how a building performs. They don't just want to save money. They want to do a good job so they can build a good reputation and get that next job. So they're human beings, and many contractors now become my absolute best friends because we've been through the battle of getting a good building designed and built together.
So it makes sense, right, that the model works better. And you talked about an example. Are there other examples of design and build collaborations today? And how prevalent is it?
It's happening all over, Mark. In the United States, it's happening. It's popping up everywhere. I thought actually that the private sector would be the first to adopt it, but actually there are very enlightened public sector, cities and counties and states that have adopted this. They're just running with it. They're saying, this costs us too much money. It's a bad way for us to procure new buildings. So let's change the way we work. And they're having to change the law, but people are getting at that. We actually have a small study group in buildingSMART that's studying law. It's a very complex subject because each country is different. But this is not just happening here. It's happening in Europe, again, in spades, all over the place. And in many countries now, there's a preponderance of design-build arrangements. Architects and contractors they work together in a project, they find they like each other, they trust each other, and they say, well, why don't we go after the next project together as a team and present ourselves as a team that knows how to work together? Makes perfect sense. And if you're an owner, you're looking for a smooth process, that's the team to pick, the one that works well together, that's been through the challenges of putting together a complex building and come out sunny side up.
So what are the benefits of this collaboration? If architects and contractors are going to work together to design and build buildings as a team, what are the benefits of that for the rest of the industry and for society at large?
First is that the designer and the builder each contribute to a better building. Each entity has something to contribute. It's a collaboration, putting people with different abilities, different knowledge together can result in a better building. That's the first one. The second one is huge. If you share the risk, Mark, designing and building a building is a risky proposition, period.
Yes, sir.
Everybody that's been through that knows it. If you share that risk between the design and the build team, you have a much better opportunity to share a reward at the end of making the problems that do come up, the things that you missed, the things that don't quite fit, of solving those in some expeditious way instead of fighting about it. So shared risk is the best way to manage the risk. I believe that right down to my toes. And finally, smart owners are quite often now setting bonus provisions in the contract for a design build or IPD, which bonuses the design and build team for meeting certain criteria, working within the budget, fewer change orders, working within the original project schedule. So if there's an incentive and you can be part of a bonus at the end, why in the heck wouldn't you collaborate?
So, Patrick, this makes a lot of sense. And this model makes a lot of sense. Next week, we're going to go back to BIM and back to IFCs and talk about how this shared BIM future works, right? How this collaboration model can benefit from the work that buildingSMART is doing with IFCs and Open BIM. We're going to talk about that next week. Before we wrap up here, what are the lessons that we should take away from this episode?
Okay, well, Mark, the first one is that design and build were together for most of history. It's only with the Industrial Revolution and about the time of the U.S. Civil War that design and build began to be completely separate. Second is that architects and contractors each bring unique knowledge to the project, and we need both. We need both for the best opportunity to have a successful project. The next one is design build teams are better positioned to share risk together. And shared risk is the best way to manage risk. Legal barriers will still need to be removed. There are still legal barriers in various jurisdictions, but this will happen. There will be a demand for it. It will continue to grow. So those will come down. The legal barriers basically reflect past practice. And as practice evolves, eventually the legal system will evolve to match. And then finally, the big one for me as an architect, architects can focus on design again, not practicing defensive architecture to protect myself from that bad contractor, but instead I can be a good designer with a contractor friend advising me along the way, helping my design to be better. That's a very big thing, Mark, for us architects.
To continue the story, come back next week for the next episode of Build Smart. We're going to talk about shared BIM future and how this collaboration that we're talking about can benefit from Building Smart's work with BIM and IFC.
We really are describing, it's a combination of drawings and specs on steroids. So we developed these very elaborate BIM models. And then, well, because we're in an environment where the law is mostly design, bid, build, when we have a design, bid, build project, we do a really bad thing, Mark. We actually take the BIM model and cut sections through it, basically print out 2D drawings and specs so that the contractor gets old-fashioned drawings and specs to bid the job. Why?
Thank you for listening. Season 2 of Build Smart podcast has been made possible in part by Building Smart International, the worldwide industry body driving the digital transformation of the world's built assets. Learn how Building Smart International is impacting our world and how you might get involved at buildingsmart.org. This podcast is a Gable Media production and is produced by Demetrius Lynch Jr. Gable Media is the home of curated thought leadership for an audience dedicated to building a better world. You can listen in, subscribe, and find more content like this from our network partners at gablemedia.com. That's GABL media.com.